What's up? Tori, aka Splatter, aka Tori here. And today I wanted to do something a little bit different than past weeks in terms of discussing strategy. Rather than going on a relatively long-winded rant about kind of how things are progressing in FRC, I decided that I wanted to do something a little bit shorter form. So this week I'll be testing out a format called 7 in 10, where I go over 7 strategic concepts over a span of just 10 minutes. So if you like this format, comment, subscribe, like, I don't know. But either way, let's get to the main takeaways. We're going to be covering kind of the entirety of week 1 here, but we'll be focusing on a couple of particularly core ideas. The first thing that I wanted to draw attention to, kind of core idea number 1, is that we still have a pretty wide variety of archetypes that are doing quite well at competition. And even though there are some archetypes that are showing up more among these top teams, it's pretty darn close. So I surveyed the top 12 teams by EPA from StatBotics. I did 12 because there's still some week 1 stuff going on in Israel and stuff could change. Of these top 12, 8 feature multi-wide shooters and 4 feature turrets. And similarly, 8 feature designs that can go under the trench and 4 that can't. Now you could say that this means multi-wide shooters and trench bots are winning, but I don't think that's the case. 8 and 4 is still well within the realm of just random noise and random variance if you're looking at it from a binomial kind of distribution. And as the meta progresses, I would not be surprised if, at least in the turret front, we start to see more and more advantages for turreted shooters. So, TLDR, at this point, execution seems to matter more than the actual archetype you choose, but certainly none of the multi-wide versus turret, trench versus no trench decisions seem to be holding back teams from making it to the very top of the EPA charts. Takeaway number 2 out of 7. The mad dash to the middle is still very much the meta in autonomous, and you kind of have to do it if you want to compete at the highest level. For this, I've pulled up one of the finals matches, or not finals, a preview of the finals at Half Moon Bay, and if I let this video play out, you're going to notice that pretty much everyone runs straight to the middle. 1678, 9470, 604 all make a mad dash for fuel over here, and it goes everywhere. And if I let this play out more, 971 comes in late to the party, and they get nothing. Now, obviously, you could say, you should go for these fuel here, but that's hard to know ahead of time, because you're relying on figuring out how fuel's going to scatter. And this kind of mechanic is going to wind up with A2 losing auto, and as a result, falling pretty far behind against an alliance that's already extremely difficult to come back against. Now, these are all great teams. Again, 604 and 971, particularly 971, is going to figure out autonomous routines. This is week 1, and what we're doing is insanely impressive for week 1. But it just goes to show how even being a second late in autonomous can have major ramifications throughout the match. And we saw this again and again from a variety of different events. So that's point number 2. The mad dash in the middle is still very much meta in auto. The next thing I want to bring up, point number 3, is that shoving appears to be the new passing. In a lot of events previously, whoever could, like in Crescendo, whoever could get a lot of notes over to their corner of the field by a little amp structure was in a really good position to win the match. This year, it seems like shoving, for a lot of teams, is what passing used to be. If you can't pass the fuel from the middle, and a lot of teams can't, it requires localization, requires a good amount of energy, a good amount of power, just shove it, and shoving it seems to be pretty darn effective. I found that more teams have had success shoving over the trench than over the bump, and if you're going to be a shoving team, you want to be a trench bot, because with the bump, you get this buildup of fuel right around here, and this causes problems later on. But if you can shove under the trench and utilize the human player as kind of a 4th offensive machine, you wound up having a disproportionately high success at week 1. And I got to a point where The meta at some places began to be defend these trenches in front of human player stations to prevent shoving actions. This is going to go on the opposite side of the field. It's going to go on right here. But I want you to take a note as to what 2028 in red does. Sorry, 2068 in red does. This is 1731 in blue. 1731 tries to do the shoving action into this trench to get more balls on their side of the field. And 2068 actually stops them from this shove by playing defense on the trench. Effectively, they recognize 1731 has a double turret, so rather than try to defend them directly, just try to deny game pieces from getting to their side of the field to begin with. I think that this, preventing shoving, just like trying to defend a passer in 2024, could be a kind of sneaky meta strat for trying to limit the number of game pieces that your opposing alliance has access to during the endgame. And I think that that'll be a bit more prominent, again, in front of these human player stations where, you have this kind of additional option for shooting, maybe even the other side, but still, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but 2068 gigabrained this by keeping 1731 from doing the shoving. Point number 4. Core takeaway from week 1, defense is still very much a work in progress, and it seems to vary heavily from event to event. At some events, especially in playoffs, defense was pretty light. In smaller districts, for example, where you only had like 30 or 32 teams, the second pick often had mobility issues, and that often limited their ability to be effective on defense. But when you talk about events like Alexandria, when you had like 40 teams and a much deeper pool, you had a lot more teams that were strong defenders toward the latter part of that draft, and by the time you got to playoffs, you were going to be defended, sometimes aggressively. As I mentioned earlier, teams were playing defense in a variety of different ways. Sometimes they'd play defense on these kind of defenses here. Sometimes they'd play defense on the fuel, like what we just saw. Sometimes they would defend man-to-man against a particular robot. Right? It seemed to vary a lot. So when it comes to defense, I would say the meta is pretty far from solidifying. And I would expect defensive strategies to change drastically even before something like week 3, week 4, much less DCMP and champs. So TLDR, jury's still out on defense. Takeaway number 5. Availability is the best ability. This week 1 really felt like a week 1 when it came to robot durability across a lot of different events. A lot of teams, understandably, are still really trying to make sure machines work for that first day. There are a lot of moving parts to each of these robots, and they all have to work in sync in order to get a machine that can actually intake, process, and shoot fuel. This will change over time, but for now, highly reliable teams are at a premium. A lot of this reliability also comes into play with the bump in the trench. There were a lot of crowd surfing incidents on the bump, and a lot of decapitation issues on the trench. One key takeaway from this is that clearance, yes, is Boolean, but the exact trench height and the exact height of your robot is not. So just be really wary about what kind of tolerance the field is going to have and how high up your robot's actually going to be. To kind of speed run the last 2 points. Point number 6, climbing is still a meme. If I go to StatBotics right here, you will see that among the teams with the highest overall points, the endgame tower and towers as a whole are pretty much just randomly distributed. They're just random noise. Teams aren't really climbing. They're not getting a lot of points on climbing. And it's hard to see how the points from climbing will actually make a difference later on in the event as the competition progresses. The point value just really isn't there too much. And final takeaway, takeaway number 7, 1 seeds wound up dominating. I wound up looking at 28 events over the course of week 1, and of them, 25 times the 1 seed won, the 2 seed won twice, and the 3 seed won once. This is domination from the 1 seed, and it suggests that teams are able to win just because they have more fuel shooting capacity than lower seeds. Expect this to change, but for now, they're pulling away with it. So either way, I think that's 10 minutes of content. 10 minutes of FRC strategizing. Hopefully, you all enjoyed this sort of video. And if it does well, I'll probably do something like this for later weeks. So either way, splatter out.